Joining me now, former U.S. ambassador to NATO under former President Barack Obama, Ivo Daalder is with us. Ambassador, thank you for joining us on this very momentous day. You've been watching the images of the two presidents leave their planes, meet on the tarmac, a warm handshake, and walk to the vehicle that will now take them to their bilateral. Your initial impressions of this?
Well, here are clearly two leaders who are trying to figure out a way to move forward. That's the reason they're here. They want to find a way, in President Putin's case, of restoring and normalizing relationship with the United States, and in President Trump's case, find a way towards an end of the war in Ukraine and hopefully a lasting peace. It is a first step. So far, there are many questions to be raised about how you're going to get to a peace agreement when one of the two protagonists is actually not in the room, is not in the country, is not part of the discussion. But these two leaders are going to see where they can end up and hopefully bring us closer to an end of the war, and a war that ends in a way that keeps Ukraine secure and Europe secure. You know, President Trump has said his goal here is not necessarily to strike the deal. It's to get the right people at the table to find some kind of deal. So in a situation like this, how do you define success? You know, how do you determine that this went well enough to move things forward versus stalling out the whole process? Yeah, I would have preferred that the meeting would have taken place only with the participation of President Zelensky as well. After all, this is a war that Russia started against Ukraine, and it won't be ended until those two countries sit across the table from each other and try to find a way out. So I think success would mean if we can get through that process, if we have an agreement on the Russian side to sit down with the Ukrainians, to do so without conditions, hopefully with a ceasefire, which the Ukrainians have said that they would accept, but Russia has consistently rejected, even though it was President Trump who has proposed it. So hopefully a ceasefire and an agreement to sit down and have serious discussions about how to end this conflict. And that is something that only the Ukrainians can do for Ukraine, and frankly, only the Russians can do for Russia. So that's how I would hope it would end, and we'll see whether that's the case. You know, you look at this on paper, and if you just line it up on paper, it looks like nothing should work here, right? Putin wants what he can't have, and you can't trust him, okay? And Ukraine has said they're not willing to give what Putin wants. So the President of the United States is the guy going in here to try to break that logjam. How do you do that? What is the way you do that? Is it to get... Do you find a crack in what Putin's asking for? Do you maybe say to yourself, there's something I can go back to Zelensky in Europe and get them to agree to that they maybe haven't said publicly yet? How do you do it when on paper it just looks like nothing is possible here? It's tough, and it's tough particularly since the other party is not at the table. But one way you might be able to do it is to tell Putin that this war needs to end, that there has to be a ceasefire, that at some point there needs to be a negotiation about the territory, but let's at least freeze the lines where they are today. And secondly, and importantly, and this is really critical, to be able to convince the Ukrainians that we, and by we, I mean the United States and the Europeans, have their back. That if the ceasefire is used as a way for Russia to reset itself, to go back on the offensive in a different way, that it would then have to confront not just Ukraine, but other military capabilities and forces that are on the ground. So on the one hand, Putin would get to, at least for now, have his forces where they are today. But in return, Ukraine would get the kind of security guarantees that are absolutely critical for Ukraine to be able to say, okay, I'm willing to live with a ceasefire at least as long as talking is possible with the Russians. You know, one thing, and I'm not the expert, you are, but I look at who's at the table today, and the President of the United States is there. You don't have any European leaders there. Why is that? Like, why couldn't any of Europe's leaders break through to facilitate this kind of meeting when only the President of the United States could? Well, I think fundamentally it is because both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are coming to this meeting with goals that are slightly different than either the Ukrainians or the Europeans. In the case of Vladimir Putin, he's looking towards a normalization of relations with the United States. He doesn't need the Europeans to that. He needs the United States for that, and he needs to decide what is it he's willing to give in order to move to that normalization. In the case of President Trump, he wants to end the war, no matter on what terms or in what way. He wants to end the war because that is a thing he promised to do during his election. He doesn't necessarily want to end the war in order to make sure that Ukraine is better off, because that has never been high on his priority. So there's a disjunction between the interests on the one hand of Presidents Putin and Trump and the interest of Ukraine and Europe on the other hand. That's why they're not at the table. It's also why they're extremely nervous about this meeting.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. President Trump wants to end the war. He wants a ceasefire. He abhors the killing, and he's been very clear about that. You mentioned some of the kind of alternative interests that will be present at the table with Putin and Trump. And, of course, minerals and oil. There's a lot of economic considerations here. And I just wonder, how front and center do you think those will be in the conversation that happens today?
So I wouldn't be surprised that the majority of the discussion is about these issues. I would think that President Putin came here with something that allows the President Trump to say, you know, I got a deal. Whether it's a partial ceasefire, for example, ending the bombing of cities with drones and missiles in return for no longer being targeted by Ukrainian drones. So some kind of ceasefire, and then pivot to what the president has made very clear is his number one priority, which is how to help the American economy. He said it in his gaggle on Air Force One just earlier on. He talked about that the Russians are very interested in this. Steve Witkoff, who's been to Moscow 5 times, has raised the economic issues front and center time and again. And so I would not be surprised that if they can get over the first hump, some kind of deal with regard to a ceasefire, that they will then focus on the economic issues. Yeah. That's what Putin wants, and frankly, I think that's what the president wants.
You know, you talk about people who are nervous, who are away from this table today, and you mentioned Europe and Ukraine, but I think there are folks who are nervous for other reasons too. If you're sitting in India or you're sitting in Europe right now and you're thinking about oil, the president has been very clear: stop buying and refining Russian oil and sending it to Europe to fund this war against Ukraine. So I just wonder, the tariff conversation, the sanctions conversation, there are a lot of folks around the globe right now saying if the President Trump stays at the table today and has the conversation, he might be coming back with some strong words for others well beyond Ukraine and Russia right now.
Well, particularly if the conversation with the Russians don't end up with some kind of deal or agreement.
I agree.
He's made very clear there will be severe economic consequences. But a question: the United States imports uranium for our nuclear power programs. In fact, we could not run our nuclear power plants without Russian uranium. Are we willing to make that sacrifice and suggest that we're going to do without it? And who is the biggest importer of Russian oil? It's not India, it's China.
Right.
And we have just agreed to a 90-day deferral of the tariff rates on China. We're in the middle of a big negotiation. Is the president going to levy 100% tariffs on the Chinese because of the Ukrainian conflict? Somehow I just don't see it all happening in that way. And that's why the talk of severe consequences is real. Whether those will come about, we'll have to wait and see.
Well, that's always the question, but I think we can agree the complexity here is enormous. Ambassador Ivo Daalder, thank you for your perspective. We appreciate it today on this very important day.
My pleasure.
All right.